Greetings and welcome to Education in Focus, powered by Chalkboard News. I'm Dan McCaleb, Vice President of News and Content at the Franklin News Foundation, which publishes chalkboardnews.com. Chalkboard is a news website dedicated to issues related to kindergarten through 12th grade education. Joining me today is Brendan Clary, Chalkboard's K-12 editor. How are you, Brendan?
I'm doing great, Dan. How about yourself?
I am doing well, thank you. Brendan, we've been reporting at chalkboardnews.com about growing concerns throughout K-12 schools around the country related to disciplinary issues at these schools and how school districts should handle these disciplinary issues. One shocking specific example occurred in a classroom in Flint, Michigan last week when during an argument among students, one student hurled a chair that hit a teacher in the head, knocking her out, requiring her to be hospitalized. Since our initial report, Brendan, you've learned that the student has been charged with assault. Tell us more about this very concerning story.
Yeah, this is something that I saw on Friday, but the incident happened on Thursday morning last week. And yeah, it's a shocking video to see a classroom in complete disarray. And there's video from a student. And I was able to find a different video from a different perspective from another student that was posted online. A lot of these are on Facebook or TikTok first, then will sort of get picked up by reporters or by different people and sort of reshared. And that's something else. That's a subject for another conversation about sort of seeing and maybe being rewarded for this kind of violence in schools in terms of, likes or notoriety on the internet. But yeah, it was Flint Community Schools informed families about an incident, and they said, that a teacher was hurt and that there was fighting between two scholars there. But since then, that student who was throwing the chairs has been charged with felonious assault, and the teacher who was hospitalized has since left the hospital and plans to return to work. So that's in a nutshell the incident. But I mean, and if you go to the piece on chalkboardnews.com, you can see the video is a link there. It's embedded in the piece, and you can see sort of the students' reaction when the teacher is hit with a chair. And in a longer video, which I linked to, I believe, you can see that this is not the first chair that has been thrown across the classroom, and you sort of have just there's a lot of questions that are raised there. And it's ultimately, we can see that if you do these kinds of things in a classroom, you're still accountable to, law enforcement and to sort of the legal system. So these kinds of things do have ramifications, as we've seen since then, that, if you break the law, even in a classroom, then you can be charged with assault and you're held accountable. So that is one thing to be there, but it does bring up the question, and I think you alluded to this in the beginning. Is this becoming more common, right?
Yeah, and because we've written sort of anecdotally about it, I don't know that there's a good place like the Department of Education, for example, that tracks things like this, which is an assault. The student was charged with an assault. The chair hit the teacher in the head. The teacher was knocked out and had to be hospitalized. So we've written about this in the past to Chalkboard News, and it relates to different philosophies when it comes to disciplining problem students, including whether or not a student should be removed from the classroom, because that affects the student's outcomes going forward, right? If you have a problem with a student, you remove them for an extended period of time from the classroom, what's going to happen to that student, down the road? But at the same time, when you have an incident like this, a student is charged with a felony for assaulting their teacher, I would think that would be an automatic expulsion. I don't think we know that that's happened in this case. We don't know what police charged the student with a felony assault. We don't know yet, is that right, whether the school has moved to take disciplinary action against the student?
Yeah, I am not sure about that yet. I don't think I've seen anything about the expulsion or if they're planning to be expelled. But I have heard on that note, like I believe Las Vegas area, the Clark County School District, there has been Nevada Teachers Association has weighed in on sort of these statewide bills in Nevada about, removing students from a classroom for similar kinds of things. If they're showing, they're unable, their behavior is such that they're unable to be in the classroom, then the state law requires them to kind of have some steps first, I think, and sort of mitigates what teachers can do to, take control of their classroom if you have a disruptive student. And they push back and say, what kind of environment does that create for learning and for educator safety? And so it does bring up the question of, there are these supports in place that have been added in a recent shift, I think. And I've written about restorative justice. There's been a shift, back from like these hardline no tolerance policies or zero tolerance policies, which I think were in place when I went to high school, even around 10 years ago now. But there's been a shift away from that and into more of a, let's try to keep students in class. Let's try to help them and you kind of create different pathways for them. And so there's, I think there is some question now of like, are we letting students in the classroom who are, not equipped to be there in terms of their being able to control themselves or, to not be disruptive. And so I think that is an interesting question. And the hard part about this too, and I think that something to keep in mind is we're not sure exactly what led up to this fight. What we have is a short video. We have a statement from the school, and so there's a lot of different things that maybe could have been mitigated beforehand, and that is something that it's hard to understand. Like how did we get here? But we don't have like a complete picture. We have the culmination of maybe. It's hard to say what led to these. So it's with these kinds of things, I think it's important to realize, we only have some seconds of video, but what we do have is pretty clear that, a teacher was hit by a chair, and there's no arguing with the fact that that's really hard to watch, right?
Right. And I know, particularly looking at this from the teacher's perspective, I would not want to return to a classroom where a student threw a chair at me, knocked me out to the point where I needed to be hospitalized. So again, as you said, Brendan, we only know a snippet of information at this point. We don't know what started the argument that led to the things being thrown across the classroom, including the chair that knocked out the teacher. But it should not be in the classroom and should not be allowed. It does nothing for the other students who were disrupted during this arm break. And it does look like from that second video that you mentioned, it does look like there was some other students at least involved in the altercation. So let's just hope the school district thoroughly investigates it and take proper action, and our best certainly to the teacher who was assaulted. Brendan, that is all the time we have. Listeners can keep up with the story and all stories related to K-12 education at chalkboardnews.com. For Brendan Clary, I'm Dan McCaleb. Please subscribe, and thank you for listening.